What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Joe, join or die Rodgers, barbecue and dad jokes and pleb life, media ops at Bitcoin Magazine, and building Bitcoin words. I did check out Bitcoin words, and I think it's awesome. I really enjoyed this article that you put out in the September batch. Bitcoin as a tool for succession by Yuri De Gaia. Welcome to the show. How are you, Joe?
Thank you so much. Glad to be here. Man, you've built up quite a catalog very quickly. Very exciting to see. I think we need more podcasts. Bullish on podcast.
I agree. I think the space is only growing. I think we need more voices and just get more content out. And it's a lot of fun. I'm so happy you're here. I did I did read that article, and I did love Bitcoin words. I'd love to jump into that first. I mean, you're kind of putting out, your own curated voice there. And I looked at these articles, and they're not your typical best of. They're amazing articles, but it's not what you're going to find everywhere else. You're really curating and bringing some new things to the table and some voices I hadn't heard. So what's going on there?
Well, for me personally, I started this project, Words, back in the spring of 2018. And for me personally, I was bookmarking just all these articles. And for me, I was just struggling to find good signal. I was just bookmarking everything. There's articles all over the internet. People were self-posting on blogs. They're going on Medium, just crazy long tweet storms. And basically, there's just really hard to find one single source. So my idea for the project was, hey, can I just curate this into a journal format? So I started throwing it on GitHub into this kind of like journal format. And it's basically the articles that I come across each month. And like you said, there are the heavy hitters each month, but then there's some stuff that's not on the beaten path. And really, my goal for the project is that, in 10 years, there's going to be some young guns coming up. And I think that there will be some value in seeing what was relevant.
Right.
And, I think that I'm not exactly the strongest writer, but I do a lot of consumption. And I think that there's some value for curators out there. And I feel kind of like it's kind of cheesy, but like a Bitcoin monk. I'm out there transcribing and preserving the written word for kind of the next generation. But, I kind of take that to heart. But, man, to be honest with you, Cedric, earlier this year, I don't know if you remember, like GPT-3 was released, this AI next generation. And after I saw it, man, I got really bummed out because I thought this computer is going to be doing curation so much better than I can. And I literally, for a couple of weeks, I was like, this is a pointless project. Why would I continue doing this? In 10 years, they're going to have AI that can scan the entire internet and find the best signal on keywords or whatever they want. So I went through this little like reality check of, hey, are we going to stay steadfast here? We're going to abandon. And I was like, the show must go on. You know what? Yeah. Let GPT-3 do its things, and I'll have my touch on things.
I thought you were going to go the other way and be like, this is terrible, this GPT-3, and we need this human curation. and I think that is great that you're doing it. And like kind of said at the top of the show, there were really articles I hadn't come across before, and it seemed to be two vectors that really stood out to me. It was a lot of tech, and then like a lot of sovereignty stuff that I hadn't seen. And I'm wondering, is that where your interest lies, or maybe I'm broad stroking too much?
I think that for me, just going down this whole Bitcoin rabbit hole is, if you don't know this, Cedric, the journals come out once a month, and they go back to January of 2018. But I've got a backlog dating back to like 2013. There's like 500 or so articles that are to be uploaded. It's just a matter of time. But that being said, some interesting observations. So there's definitely, you see writers write a lot over a period of time, and then they kind of disappear. And then next generation of writers come along, and then they disappear. It's almost like passing the torch to next generation. That's kind of the way that I see it.
Yeah.
And over the past couple of years, we've seen new kind of writers and thinkers emerge, which is a good thing. But to answer your question, maybe you get that feeling. Maybe it was just a sample for the time period of journals that you looked. But I do think that something that is definitely emerging are Bitcoin disciplines. And, for me, I personally believe that Bitcoin touches everything. And so from that, we are seeing disciplines emerge around Bitcoin. So the big ones that I've kind of like personally identified would be finance. So there's a whole sector of finance doing metrics and on-chain analysis. You've got the economics discipline. So that would be like Austrian focus and all the economic models that have to do with Bitcoin. I would say the law and legal side of things. The next one would be like game theory and network effects. And then kind of the last one for me would be the technical side of things. So how this thing actually works.
Right.
And there's a lot more. Like the newest one in 2020 that I think is a trendsetter is art. And I know that there's been kind of crypto art in the past, but I think that kind of art is this kind of big trend that I've personally witnessed in 2020.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just like really interesting thought leadership in each of these disciplines because the macro bros have their own world and language and pods that they go on. And then you've got the builders doing their own thing and everyone's building and contributing to Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, each of these disciplines are benefiting Bitcoin as a whole. So yeah, I'd say those are definitely some that I'm fascinated by, is sovereignty and tech, but I think it does cover a lot of the other ones. It's just a matter of what gets published that month.
Yeah, it kind of feels like with the art popping up, it's almost like with hip hop, like some of the like figurines or T-shirts and hats, and very like just kind of permeating the culture.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing digital art, obviously, like this whole emergence of the NFT kind of revolution. But some other stuff, I mean, we've seen some true Bitcoin like hip hop come onto the scene through like DJ Skrilla, and I know there's some others out there that I'm forgetting. My boy Phil, he wrote the ETF song with the guitar, which was pretty cool.
Right.
But now we're seeing something I'm really floored by has been VR. VR's here in 2020, and so we're now seeing entire worlds created around Bitcoin community. So if you look at BitPaint, he's created worlds kind of in partnership with Dirgigi, and they're doing worlds around 21 lessons, and they're trying to figure out education through VR with Bitcoin. So yeah, there's all these kind of neat subgenres popping up that have to do with Bitcoin. It's really fascinating.
Yeah. And what do you do at Bitcoin Magazine? I know it's media ops, but that's kind of broad.
Yeah, I like broad terms, right?
Sure.
Basically, I'm doing part-time over there. I lost full-time employment. I was with a big tech company for about a decade, and I got hit with the coronavirus workforce reduction hammer back in September. And literally the next Monday, my good friend who you have interviewed, CK, he reached out, and we were talking about me coming on, doing some part-time help with media operations. Essentially means asking people to contribute to Bitcoin Magazine. So my experience with words, I'm already kind of doing personal curation for that project. But I've each article that goes into words, I ask people for their permission. And so I have limited relationship with a lot of people. And since this time at Bitcoin Magazine, a couple months now, I've got to just build on my relationships. And so essentially, sorry, really long answer, is I'm basically getting people in headlocks to contribute articles to us.
That's awesome. So let's get into it. 3D printing, guns, and Bitcoin. I put up a post. I'm like, I want to learn about these three things individually and how they kind of crisscross a bit. And everyone was just like, and a lot of people were like, Joe Rodgers is the person to talk to. So, what is your familiarity or background with 3D printing?
Yeah, I started, number one, I've always been fascinated, obviously sovereignty is a theme that matters to me. But I don't know how it slid in, thank goodness for Twitter, but I kept just learning about the whole 3D gun printing community and revolution that's happening right now. And so in 2019, just being a lurker, watching and just being fascinated by what they're doing. I think it was January, it was before the lockdown happened. I said, by God, I need to get me a 3D printer. So I got one off of AliExpress and it arrived, and I watched the tutorials and I found the 3D printing community and downloaded files and hit print. And I started printing, gun parts like magazines and Glock frames and just crazy things. I mean, I'm not a super technical guy, Cedric. I mean, the engineers and the community that's developing these files is completely open source, and just amateurs and hobbyists like myself can print functioning parts for firearms, which is incredibly empowering.
Yeah. Were you a gun owner before this? Do you have did you grow up with guns in your house?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, I grew up in the South. I'm down here in Arkansas, and I mean, it's definitely part of the culture and community. And I mean, I've got several of firearms here at the house, and yeah, I mean, I'd say it's part of life down here, and it's definitely something that I don't know a lot of people that are anti-gun down here, and in my personal life. So yeah, I'd say that it isn't like I'm in the woods every weekend or anything, Cedric, but everyone is armed down here, and I think it's a way of life and part of the culture.
Right.
But the whole 3D printing guns, man, Cody Wilson, he's actually from here in Central Arkansas. So when he dropped the Liberator, that definitely got my mind, because that happened back in 2012. That was the first 3D printed single shot gun, and that just kind of I didn't jump on board with it, but that definitely got wheel spinning. But I think that Bitcoin led me to 3D printing. I don't think I would have found 3D printing without Bitcoin, because Bitcoin got me super passionate about sovereignty. I mean, I got interested in kind of liberty back in the Ron Paul election, back in '08. And then I just kind of fell away from that, job, life, wife, married, kids, all that good stuff. And Bitcoin has reignited my, passion for those topics.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would have been interested in 3D printing the same way I'm interested in a lot of tech, like even VR, but I think that, Bitcoin kind of brought the sovereignty notion to it for me and made me more interested. But, as someone who grew up with owning guns or just comfortable guns, everyone's a gun owner, or no, I shouldn't say everyone, but how has 3D printing kind of changed the game? Because you can go to a gun store and buy guns. You can go to an ammo store or guns and get your guns and your ammo. But how does 3D printing change things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was lucky enough, another person you've interviewed, Katie Anita, who I've listened to that pod before our talk today, and great pod, I love her. She asked me to do a presentation at BitBlock Boom, kind of on this exact topic. What are the sovereignty and 3D printing? Why does it matter, and why should Bitcoiners care about this? And I don't know if you've read it, but The Sovereign Individual, as you read through that, you kind of learn about the power transition that goes on. And so we're kind of in a power transition between the nation state and the sovereign individual. And part of that thesis is that technology kind of diminishes the return on investment for
state-sponsored violence.
For violence. There's a lower return on investment for violence. I think I'm getting the terminology wrong because it's been a while. But anyway, so essentially, as a Bitcoiner, we're taking our sovereignty back by running nodes and participating in Bitcoin. And 3D printing guns disrupts the state further, because now you're able to arm yourself. Now, here in the States, especially, down south, I know there's definitely jurisdictions in the U.S. where gun ownership is not friendly and it's not easy. But I mean, down south, yeah, we've got luxury. You can go to Academy and Walmart and buy guns and ammo. But around the world, and even in certain states here in the United States, there's not so friendly jurisdiction. So what 3D printing guns does is now the state can't assume that you're not armed anymore. Now it kind of starts to disrupt their monopoly on violence, because now they just can't assume that you don't have a semiotic 9mm gun that you're able to make at your own house. Mm-hmm. So this by that being existing in the wild, it kind of disrupts their monopoly on violence, which is incredibly awesome and empowering for us. I mean, the joke at Big Block Boom was, if you're not a real Bitcoiner unless you have a 3D printer. That was kind of my closing remarks at that.
I get what you're saying there. So, where do I go to get a 3D printer? I mean, it seems like they're relatively easily accessible now. But I'm wondering, one of my questions about that is twofold. So maybe I can go to AliExpress or Amazon. But what about someone in Hong Kong? Is there, 'cause a barrier to maybe the 3D printer is the actual size and hardware.
Yeah, I mean, I've got one on the desk behind me. It's probably like, I don't know, 30
It doesn't
inches
even look
tall.
that big.
Yeah, it's not super big. But the print area is probably like, I don't know, 16 inches by 16 inches by 16 inches cube.
Not that big. That's okay.
No, it's not. I mean, it fits in a flat pack box, and you literally build it all.
And
but,
what is
I mean,
that like? Is that difficult? As
it
a
was kind of scary.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, let's say I'm not technical as in contributing to Bitcoin Core,
Right.
but I'm not afraid to, like, I built a computer on my own.
Sure.
Like if I have directions and a YouTube tutorial, I can get by pretty good. And there's a ton of tutorials on assembling the printer I have behind me. It's the Ender 3. And FYI, for your listeners out there, if they want to learn more about this, I've set up a great GitHub repository with all the information I'm talking about, where to get it, where to source it, where to find community. It's at guns.team.
Guns.team.
Yeah, that's
.com?
it. So it's real easy. No, that's it. Just guns.team, and it'll redirect to GitHub.
Okay, great. Guns.team.
Yeah, but I was going to tell you, so I've got the Ender 3 behind me. This is like the most basic one. It's very manual. It doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles. The prices on it, they keep going down because they keep getting newer generations out with more bells and whistles. This one's quite manual, but it's kind of the de facto one that the gun printing community recommends. Its starting price is around like $170 US. So
That's cheap,
is there an up?
in my
It is
opinion.
cheap. Is there an upfront cost? Yes. Like I get it.
But I thought it was
once
gonna be
you
like
get it-
$3,000 or $5,000 or $900.
No, probably like 4 or 5 years ago, man. They were spendy. They were proud of them, but the price just keeps going down. They keep, economies of scale. I think they're just selling so many of them and keep improving the tech. So barrier to entry is like, a couple hours assembling this bad boy and, less than $200 US. And then a roll of plastic is like $23. And our friend at Crypto Cloaks in the Bitcoin community, he's about to be selling his own branded plastic, which is pretty awesome to see. But yeah, I mean, you can get started pretty quickly and easily. And
So how
it's
much-
literally, Cedric, you just get a file, you load it on an SD card, and you put it in, and you go through the menu and hit print. And it's not that easy. You got to tune it up a little bit, but man, it's very.
So
very
what
simple.
are we talking about to print a gun? Like $400 or $500 all in with ammo.
So I think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple different answers, because you can't print everything. Some parts are metal, and it takes some fabrication from like a hardware store. But to answer, I'm going to answer your question two ways. So here in the U.S., certain parts of the gun are regulated, certain parts are not regulated. So here in the U.S., typically the part that receives the magazine, so the magazine's, what you'd call like a clip that holds the bullets, that part of the gun is regulated. That's called a receiver. So the barrel and the slide and the ejector, like all of these moving parts that are metal, typically those parts are not regulated here in the United States. So if you as a hobbyist in the United States wanted to build your own gun, and for it to be, under the radar, and by the way, there's nothing illegal about building your own gun at your house. You can literally print the receiver, and then you can acquire the other parts. I think that you can buy like a barrel and the trigger assembly and the slides on even eBay. So those parts are quite readily available. It's the receiver part that is highly regulated in the US. And by the way, it's opposite in Europe. The receivers you can get easily, but the barrel, the metal parts, are the ones that are tough to get. So if you were wanting to make, let's say, a Glock pistol, you could print the frame, and then you could go online and buy with your credit card the barrel and the slide, which are metal parts. Right. Now that's one route, Cedric. The other route, the guys at Deterrence Dispense, that's kind of the unofficial 3D printing gun community collective. Some of the names you probably know is like Jay Stark and Ivan the Troll and Control Pew. Those are kind of like the unofficial leaders. And there's a bunch of other great guys on there. But they've been working hard because we live in friendly jurisdiction in America. But Jay Stark, he's been Central Europe, and it is highly, highly regulated there. You can't get anything without certain kind of paperwork. So the idea was, how can we build a complete gun that's usable with a hardware store and a 3D printer? So they've designed a semi-automatic 9mm gun called the FGC-9. And the FGC-9, it's built around a Glock 9mm mag. You 3D print everything up to the metal part, which is the barrel. And the barrel, if you know anything about guns, the inside of the barrel is rifled, so it actually spins. So that as a bullet comes out, it will actually spiral like a football would be. That increases its accuracy. So they developed a way to actually do rifling inside a barrel it's called electrochemical manufacturing. I hope I'm not going too technical on you here, but essentially all the stuff that you could need to accomplish that, it's salt water and electricity, and you 3D print a jig and you get a piece of hydraulic pipe, and you can 3D print the spiral insert, and you run electricity through it, and literally an hour later you have a rifled barrel that you can use on your gun. And there's a couple other little parts that you would weld, but essentially all the parts you can get at a Home Depot, and the rest you can 3D print, and you've built yourself a working 9mm semi-automatic rifle, which is pretty badass.
How did you learn all about like how much a gun works? Was it through the printing, or did you have some of this knowledge beforehand?
I didn't have any knowledge.
I've
watched a lot of YouTube. The printing, definitely. If you dig around some of these diagrams, you're just going to learn through that. And then if you hang around on the Deterrence Dispensed Keybase group, which is it's open to the public, so anyone listening, if they want to learn more, that's where the most community is on this. This is where the guys who are developing all these various platforms are contributing and sharing information. You hang around there, and there's all kinds of questions. Community will answer and everything. There's super high signal, and something that has developed in this community as well is a couple years ago when they were starting to roll out these guns, there wasn't a lot of good documentation. So in 2020, that has completely changed. They figured out that, hey, we can release files to the wild, but if the average Joe doesn't have good instructions on how to assemble it, they aren't going to do it. It's going to be too difficult because not everyone's like a mechanical engineer or a gunsmith. So the rise of documentation, it's become really important. The designers have put a lot of focus and emphasis on that. So we're seeing some really high quality guns be released, but also documentation that is very easy to understand. And they try to address anything that an idiot would ask. They try to address that.
Right. That's kind of one of my questions, like my main question. So, you're saying this, the software is getting easier to manage and the quality of the guns is getting better. So how do I gain confidence that I'm able to verify that the gun is going to work the way it's supposed to?
Well, number one, you're done with the gun, so you want to start with caution, right? Proceed and tread lightly. I don't think that, the first one, number one, if I've never shot a gun, probably don't want to 3D print a gun and that'd be my first experience. I'd probably want to build up some confidence and knowledge, take some training on how to properly use and understand a firearm. Maybe even talk to an expert about, the disassembly of a gun and how to clean a gun properly, like all those little things that you don't necessarily get just at a course to get your gun license. But from there, I don't think that I would start day one printing the FGC-9. I might start with just learning how to print the magazine. That's seems like a pretty simple, trivial part, that holds the bullets, Cedric. So learn how to make that and make sure it works effectively. And then maybe step up from there would be the Glock frame, because the Glock frame, you still got to get a trigger assembly and all the metal parts you insert onto it. So I'd probably build up my expertise by starting with some of these kind of, lower risk or lower technical parts, and then build up to my, confidence and experience to something like the FGC-9.
Right. So this is not maybe like I need a gun next week. Let me crank.
You could make
out.
one that quickly, but
not that my life has anything like that. But you know what I mean. Like,
sure.
In that case, maybe if you live in America, you just go and buy a gun, get training, get more familiar, and this is maybe more of a hobby that you grow into. But you mentioned something about it's legal to print guns at home. And I just want to kind of cross-reference that with, does that mean you have to have, a license from the state and then you could print guns from home, the way you need a license to go buy a gun in most states?
Yeah, I should probably say, do
and I know you're
research.
Not a lawyer. Yeah, I'm not holding any legal advice here.
Please
I'm just,
forgive me, guys.
But
I can say, I definitely researched Arkansas, and I researched Texas, and I could not find anything that says it's illegal to build yourself a gun. Where it becomes illegal in our jurisdiction down here is if you start selling them, if you start selling parts and you start doing things like that, then you get into some real hairy area. But if you're building a gun for yourself, that is legal, as long as you're not building like an automatic weapon, because that is illegal. You do need, certain paperwork to have an automatic weapon. So don't go 3D printing the parts to make your AR-15 automatic, which that stuff's out there. Just know that that's highly illegal.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to hold you, do your own research, but like, for a homeowner, what is a good gun, like for home defense?
Yeah, I think that a couple answers. First thing I want to say is, like, if your life was in danger and you had a choice between, a proper Glock from the factory or your 3D printed one, I'm going to grab the factory one. Okay, let's not get this messed up.
Sure.
Okay, or I'm going to grab my AR-15 and not my FGC-9 if there's an imminent danger. But that still doesn't discredit the quality and the fact that those guns are highly lethal and will work. That's the first thing. But when we're talking home defense, I think a couple different strategies. I think it matters on where you live, if you're in an apartment complex or if you're in a home in a neighborhood or if you're out in the middle of nowhere, because I think that would help vary my answer. Or if live by yourself or if you have kiddos, because certain bullets will do different kind of damage. For example, like a shotgun, depending on the round, will not penetrate a wall, right? So if you had bird shot, it isn't going to go through a bunch of 2 layers of drywall. So if you had kiddos, that'd probably be a really good home defense. Up close, you're going to really screw somebody up, but you're not risking someone in the next room. And that would probably apply to something like an apartment complex or something. But if you live out in the country and you're by yourself, have whatever gun you feel comfortable with. I think that you just, whenever, you're pulling out a gun, I think that it's really important to think about not just yourself and your own personal life, and the bad guy, but, if you miss or if they miss, and guns start flying, it's the lives around you. But I'm definitely not a gun trainer. I mean, we have different options at our house, but I mean, for me personally, I'd probably say something like a shotgun would be the best home defense, but they're not always readily accessible. You can't conceal a shotgun like you can a pistol. So maybe have a safe spot that you have a certain, like a 9mm downstairs in your shotgun by your bed at night. I don't know. There's a lot of different strategies, Cedric.
Right. So let's take the one where you got the shotgun or any gun by your bed.
Sure.
Let's take the situation where, maybe things have taken a quick turn in your house. Maybe you're having a party, maybe there's guests, maybe an incident breaks out and some sort of gun defense is needed. In that case, and we're talking about, quick decision here. Like, are you reaching for a gun that's fully loaded, that's locked away somewhere in a nightstand? Like, and again, we're not holding you to, home defense parameters or, law here, but like some
I would
decent
not
advice.
Want to bring a unloaded gun to a gunfight. That would be like
right. So does that
the
mean
worst.
Like, do you need a loaded gun in your house somewhere for that kind of scenario?
I think you would. I think that a gun, you would want it to be loaded, of course, safely stored away from any kind of children or something like that. That's, very, very important and should be a very top priority. But I mean, guns they're just a paperweight unless they're loaded, unless the operator knows how to use them properly.
Right.
But something that happened earlier this year, you remember the couple in St. Louis who defended their property and they came out on their porch with the AR-15 and then the wife had the pistol.
100%.
Forgot their names.
I know what you're talking about.
So there was a ton of different chirping going on, people talking about the legality of, protecting yourself and both. Regardless, something I learned about was the legality of brandishing a firearm because based on your jurisdiction, it's illegal to obviously point your gun at somebody or even pull one out, which is crazy because, you can't protect yourself unless you brandish your firearm, which is like counterproductive. It seems like sometimes if you brandish firearm, you could de-escalate a situation. So that varies by jurisdiction as well. So state by state, I think there's different brandishing laws. So man, there's just so much to take into account. I mean, I think that if you have to pull one out, in self-defense, I mean, man, I don't know how to answer it for you.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It's just it's something that you have to be prepared to do. But one of the attendees at BitBlock Boom this year, he was staying at an Airbnb, and he was assaulted at his car with 3 guys, and they had big sticks, and he was able to get into his console and pull out his concealed carry pistol and protect himself. He didn't have to fire a shot. They left immediately. But he came back to the conference, and he was swole up, had blood down his face. And, he's able to protect himself by brandishing. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't even shoot around. So there's a ton of power that you can have even by having a firearm.
Right.
And some people say, like, even in really crappy situations, even if you have the presence of something that looks like a gun, that's better than not having a gun. I think it just really comes down to the situation.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up kids, and that's probably the touchiest, or one of the touchiest subjects. I grew up in the suburbs of New York, and, some people had guns and some people didn't. I mean, there were cops in the neighborhood and hunters. My best friend's dad, he hunted.
Sure.
But I just remember a lot of the messaging that I digested as a kid. So I'm not, speaking for everybody, but it was around this whole, like, a kid's going to find the gun in the house.
Yeah.
And there's going to be that accident or school shootings. And that really colored my whole perception around guns, regardless of community members in my neighborhood who might have owned guns. Or, I do remember going on vacation with my family, and we were in the mountains, and we went to a gun range, and it was a lot of fun. But guns were never, and in that moment, it wasn't political. It was like an activity like bowling. We all had fun. But the other conversations or the messaging I got was very scary, and it made gun ownership like something not to be done. Like, you were a bad person if you needed a gun.
Yeah, I don't know, man. That that's like I don't know, Yankee Fud.
I'm not disagreeing. That's what I experienced.
I think that I sympathize with what you're saying, because I kind of grew up in that generation where the school shootings were happening. I was in high school when the trench coat killers were doing their thing in Columbine and shit, and quite scary times. But I think that, as a dad, as someone who cares about my sovereignty, and I think that other gun owners would echo this. Maybe some would, some wouldn't. But I think majority would. It would be to educate your children on proper handling of the firearm. I would want them to know how to use the firearm. I've got really little kids, so I haven't crossed that path yet. But I want them to be educated and know how to, if they had to defend themselves, I would want them to know how to use it. I'd rather them know than not know, because, again, this is a tool. They're going to be driving cars at some point. That's a pretty dangerous weapon too. But I think that just as an American, as, a Southern American, like, maybe part of the culture down here is like, yes, we want to be armed. We want to protect ourselves. This kind of stuff matters.
Yeah. Well, I'd stipulate this country was founded on guns, that we wouldn't have this freedom and the revolution. And how do you kind of, like, you mentioned the word 3D printing as a revolution. Is 3D printing going to be something that's, bigger than guns? Because it can print guns, but you could also, you don't have to get that part shipped from Amazon anymore, even if it's for your sink. That's shipping. Maybe it's
that's fascinating.
It's environmentally maybe more sustainable. It's great for the kids; they learn a lot. Universities have 3D printers. It's great for education, creativity, hobbies. But how big of a revolution is this? Is it bigger than Bitcoin? Is it hand in hand with Bitcoin? Is it bigger than guns? Is it bigger than the printing press?
Yeah, number one, love the question, because this kind of stuff really is exciting to think about the implications. You remember Bill Gates was so bold to say, computer on every desk, right? And the 3D print guys, the guys who are passionate about it, they would say 3D printer in every home.
Right.
And I think you touched on a ton of the great points. Like, this has huge implications on, supply chain, being able to sell things directly to a customer without actually even shipping anything except for bits over the internet. But some of the things I think about, I don't think it's going to be bigger than Bitcoin, but I think that they do go hand in hand, because once we go to Mars, you're not going to be taking widgets with you. You'll take printers and filament and print it yourself. So we'll have our moon money, and then we'll have our moon way or Mars way of constructing parts and widgets that we need. I think that will definitely be a no-brainer. And sci-fi kind of paves the way on that. They kind of create things. They just kind of plug in what they need, and then the wrench size that they need, that just kind of manifests itself. So I think it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. They already have. I mean, there's a 3D printer on the International Space Station. You can't really get things shipped from Amazon there in 2 days, I guess. But like when does like 3D printing change things in like a place like Hong Kong, or where
I thought about that.
Suppressed?
Like, can we airdrop printers? What is?
Back in the 90s, they, you couldn't export a lot of hardware and some code. And it's just, I mean, I guess it's hard to stop just raw plastic from entering a country, but there are ways to kind of gatekeep this stuff, I would think, in the short term.
Yeah, I mean, they start regulating certain things. So what's fascinating is like once a meme kind of propagates, it's really hard to kill. So the idea of 3D printing, now it's in everybody's mind, and you can't take it away. So what I'm getting at here is that if there is enough determination by the people in Hong Kong to start 3D printing, they would start doing it. Because there's also a community that is doing do-it-yourself on how to build your own 3D printer with over-the-counter parts. You don't have to get one from AliExpress or Alibaba. So do-it-yourself 3D printer. So there's an emerging community that's doing that. So that's further kind of decentralizing the supply chain to actually get your hands on a 3D printer. So now you got a question. Okay, are they going to start regulating the parts that you would need to do that? Are they going to start regulating little mini electric motors and rubber belts and gaskets and transistors? Like all this parts that would make up the components to do it yourself. So I think that's kind of like a losing game, because now you're going to start regulating yourself to death, which don't put it past the communist government of China. But I mean, that's a tough thing. I think the people of Hong Kong would have to want to do that for themselves. Another big barrier is, ammunition, because you can't 3D print bullets. But the guys at Deterrence Defense, that community, they're trying to address that, because that's been kind of a moving goalpost that the haters have been using against them, is like, oh, you can 3D print a gun. Now what about your ammo? Well, they just released the recipe to do your own smokeless ammo, and they're developing certain kits so that you can mold your bullets at scale much faster than kind of hand pouring copper and lead rounds one by one. So they're addressing the bullet situation, and you can make ammunition or black gunpowder, smokeless gunpowder, with kind of over-the-counter chemicals and with the right know-how. So this whole idea, this sovereign individual thesis, and the decentralized nature of this kind of movement, man, it's developing rapidly. And as it's like Bitcoin, Cedric, I told you all these different disciplines are emerging. Well, you're seeing that in the 3D gun printing space, because you've got guys who have got a chemical background. Well, now you've got a whole new market or group of people who are going to be spending their time, their cycles on what they know about. Then you've got the designers who know a lot about 3D or machining those barrels. There's going to be an expertise and simplicity that is gained for the whole community on mastering that technology. There's also a group of people that are exploring 3D printing body armor, because if you can 3D print plastic in a certain way, if you pair that with, say, something like a ceramic tile for your floor and the 3D printed plastic, you can actually stop certain caliber bullets at different velocities. So now, like, you're just seeing all these different defense technologies that are emerging from what Cody Wilson started with just the single shot, Liberator pistol.
Right. Game theory is just playing out in all different directions, it seems here, from offense to defense. In terms of like the sovereign individual, what do you think are the most important tools as we, really delve into the 21st century? Obviously,
the one that kind of has impacted me the most, it really is just how amazing cryptography is, and specifically the way that it allows you to literally communicate with whoever you want, transact money with whoever you want, send a file with whoever you want. And there ain't shit anyone can do about that because, encryption is so strong. So I think that along with, in the sovereign individual, it's about the microprocessor. The microprocessor enables, cryptography like at scale like this. But I think cryptography, if you really dig into it and pull back the covers, just the implication of, how it is a big middle finger to the state, how it enables you as an individual to have privacy, to transact and communicate with who you want, when you want, to the way now we have this digital world to send files and communicate with information in a way that, is out of the reach of the government or the state. That's incredibly empowering. So big time bullish on cryptography.
What about Arkansas? Are you big time bullish on Arkansas? How is Arkansas dealing with the state? Should I move to Arkansas? What do you think is going on in America right now and in Arkansas right now?
Sure. So Arkansas is fairly free. We've got some guidelines. You're going to go to jail if you're out in the street without a mask. They want you to wear one in Walmart and Kroger. And restaurants, you have to wear one until you're seated, and then you're free to take it off, which is just absurd. But I think overall, Arkansas, quite beautiful place. Not a ton of economic opportunity. It's a safe place, good place to raise kiddos. It's very beautiful here. And in fact, they're actually doing $10,000 if you move to Arkansas. The state government is. So if you move here for a year, the state is actually paying people to try to move here to stimulate the economy. So that fairly high taxes. I mean, compared to like Texas where there's zero income tax. I keep bringing up Texas because I lived there for 8 years.
Where?
I was in Arkansas, in North Texas, in Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex.
Okay.
And then came back to Arkansas in 2018.
I was just in Dallas yesterday.
Oh, yeah. Good town, man.
Yeah, it was great. You bring up the economic opportunity in Arkansas.
Sure.
And do you think that the United States is going to survive as an entire federal project, or do you think that these tools that are coming out to help the individual are going to help break down all states, including the U.S.? And then I'm just wondering, where does Arkansas fit into that? Yeah,
I've reached out to our governor and some of our senators and said, hey, you need to really look at what our friends in Wyoming's doing. They are declaring their sovereignty. They're putting legislation in place. But to answer your question, I don't think that the state as we know it today can continue. And I mean the federal state. Mm-hmm. I think that bring it local, bring it smaller, makes sense. And, we're set up as a republic. So I feel like a return to that would make sense. But, you're talking with Katie about, flag theory and the sovereign individual thesis enabling that. Bitcoiners will go to friendly jurisdiction. And, my wife and I, we've talked to Katie, and we have 2 kiddos. And next year, we're going to go visit Guadalajara. Like, why not? They're free down there. It's friendly tax laws. And in this remote work world, like, why wouldn't I take that opportunity? It might not make sense, but we're going to go check it out. But I foresee, Bitcoin is going to disrupt the state. It's going to disrupt the economies. The states who get it and adopt it quick and put friendly jurisdiction and guidelines in place, they will be the ones that get the Bitcoiners. The ones who don't and push back and try to keep all the money, centralized, those will be the ones that get left behind.
Wow. Yeah, man, this has been really great. You bring up the kids thing, and I'm going through that myself. Definitely.
Yeah, my little kiddo just came in the room.
No worries, man. Just trying to. I know what that's like. I'm just trying to figure out, where do we go from here? I'm talking about my family, and I'm wondering, both about flag theory and other parts of America, because I love America.
I'm scared to leave America. That's like in the bottom of my stomach. I think about Mexico and all the FUD that I've heard my whole life. It's it's dangerous and it's the Wild West. But you talk to someone like Katie, she's like, they're the most free people down here. Americans aren't free. You come to Guadalajara and you're free. But right. I have a hard time leaving the States. I love the States. I love the South. But I'm really not trying to go up north and get cold. But if I had to pick, one of two places, it would probably be in Central Texas or up into our friends in Wyoming. I know those are kind of polar opposites of the U.S., north and south, but those seem like they're trending towards the most friendliness towards the individual.
Yeah, I've been looking at those as well. I think Texas seems to be a bigger draw for me just because of the weather, and so that we could be outside all year round or most of the year.
But it gets hot.
I love the heat.
It's like an oven.
I love the heat, and I could deal with that a lot more. And it just seems like we could get more for the kids right now if we go south. I love America, not so much. Just period. I love America, and I love all the people in America, but it's not so much the nation state that I'm trying to hold on to.
I think that it's important to remember that you can love your country and hate the state.
Yeah, and well, even just any state. Like, I'm not married to this notion of states.
Sure.
I don't find that I have to be committed to one state per se. I want every state to do great, all the people to do great, but I love America and I love exploring America, and that was one of the great things about going down to Texas. I haven't traveled in 8-9 months now, and it was great to just get out of Dodge and see how other people are doing and just relate to different people. And America's a really big place. There's a lot to offer. I think
that in our lifetime, we're going to see some Citadel theory play out. I do believe that we'll see that sooner than you or I could even imagine, because it seems like this world, it just continues to move faster and faster.
Yeah.
We hit milestones a lot faster.
I'm not waiting.
Anyone can imagine. Yeah, I mean,
I'm building my
I
Citadel now. My house is my Citadel.
I'm with you, but I truly believe, the next 10 years, 20 years max, you'll see some kind of group of individuals, Bitcoiners that have big bags, find a way to acquire large swaths of land,
right,
and declare some kind of sovereign independence from a state. Now, I don't know where that's going to be. If it's going to be an island somewhere or whatever, but I would almost guarantee that we would see something like that. And if it isn't like some island somewhere, it's going to be in the most friendly jurisdictional place in the United States and just carve off a corner and tell everyone to piss off.
I think either way, I want to go find my own space. I'm not necessarily trying to run where everyone else is going, even if they're like-minded. I just want to find my own spot, do my own thing. The biggest thing, though, in terms of any geographical imprint right now is just for my kids is being around family. And not everyone in my family is looking to move or is on the exact same page. But at the same time, with things closing down and family being less, there's a lot less family who's willing to come out and play right now.
Yeah.
So, the schools are closed and my office is closed. So we're definitely toying around with the idea of bouncing, and even if it's just traveling and or relocating. But I did hear Arkansas is beautiful. I know it's got a lot of waterfalls.
It's a flyover state, and Central Arkansas, where I live, is really beautiful, and Northwest Arkansas is quite spectacular. That's where Walmart famously is located up in that part of the state, and the University of Arkansas. But that's part of the Ozark Mountains, and they have the Buffalo National River that flows through Northwest Arkansas, and my goodness, it's really something special. And there's a ton of economic activity. You spend time in Dallas, you kind of know it's kind of like this concrete jungle. Everything's brand new and real shiny and clean, and that's kind of what's happening up in that part of the state. You're seeing a lot of these kind of pre-planned big developments, a lot of those developers coming in, and they're making it really nice for kind of couples that are looking for that. But there's still a lot of open green pastures and mountains there in Northwest
That sounds
Arkansas.
good. That sounds great. I like I used to want to be always in the city, and now I just really want my own space. A lot of land and some beautiful land. I just really want to look at some beauty when I wake up.
We're in the city proper, but we're on almost an acre of land in the city, and we've got two little kids. Man, they're in the backyard in the woods, tearing it up, having fun outside every day. So lockdown hasn't been too bad if you've got a big old backyard your kids can raise hell in.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, me and my wife were even talking, well, hey, let's go a little bit further west, a little bit further outside of the city. The land's cheap out there, there's not a lot of people, but I think that we could get by and still have a good quality of life out there.
Yeah, man.
We still drive into the city for soccer practice.
Sure. No, you do what you got to do. This has been so
Yeah.
great. It's been great catching up with you, Joe Rodgers. Ride or die.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
Come on down south. Let me know when you're passing through.
Yeah, we'll be down there soon. I'm pretty sure of it. So I'll hit you up.
Cool, man. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, man. This has been dope. Peace. 3D printing, guns, and Bitcoin with Joe Join or Die Rodgers right here on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. And thank you for listening. If you dig the chats, vote with your thumbs and press 5 stars in that app. And subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel. That's the best way to get the word out so we can keep grinding out thought-provoking conversations about Bitcoin, sovereignty, and independence. This is Cedric. Peace.